Hey guys, today we're going to have a look at how to express the time when you did something or something happened. So the way in which we do this will all depend on whether we're dealing with a noun or an adjective or a verb. So let's start here with a noun. We're going to also attach the particle no to the noun. If it's a na adjective, we'll attach the na to the end of the adjective. If it's an e adjective, we want it in plain form. And if it's a verb, we also want it in plain form. And then we attach the word toki, and it can be followed by any of these particles, which include ni, wa, and niwa. I'll explain how they differ on the second slide. Let's take a look at a few examples. When I was in primary school, I hated sport, but now I love it. 小学校の時にはスポーツが嫌いでしたが、今は大好きです。So we can see here that we have a noun and we've attached no, and then our phrase toki ni wa, when I was in primary school. And then we finish with the rest of our sentence. In our second example, we're using a na adjective, which is quiet. So please explain again when it's quieter. もっと静かな時にまた説明してください. You can see here that we've attached na to the end of our adjective, and then we've followed with the phrase toki ni, when it's quieter. So we know that the word toki means time, but in this case, when we attach it to one of these expressions here, it becomes more like the English word for when. So let's take a look at another example. I prefer to be inside when it's cold. 寒い時は家の中にいるのがいいです. In this case, we have our e adjective, and it's just in its plain form. And then we've attached toki wa. So if you have a look here, we've already used 3 different particles after the word toki. In the first case, we've got ni wa. In our second example, we have ni. And in our third example, we have wa. In our fourth example, we don't actually have a particle following toki. It's just standalone. So don't you let the water run when you brush your teeth. 歯を磨いている時、水を出していませんか? In this case, we're also using a verb and it's in its plain form. 磨いている. So let's take a look at another example. I went to see the kabuki when I went to Japan while I was there. 日本に行った時、kabukiを見に行った. In this case, we have a verb again in its plain past tense, and then we've attached toki to the verb. Toki is also just standalone. There's no particle following it. And together they mean when I went. And in our final example, let's not waste water when we wash the car. 車を洗うとき、水を無駄遣いしないようにしましょう. Again, we have a verb in its plain form, which is araimasu, and that plain form is arau. So arau toki, when we wash. Now, please note that the tense of adjectives and nouns plus toki is sometimes in the present, although the meaning may be in the past. For example, chisai toki, when I was small, and kokosei no toki, when I was a high school student, and so on and so forth. Now, there's little difference between toki and toki ni. Both mean when, but both toki wa and toki ni wa mean as for when, and they suggest that there is a contrast between the time when and now or in the future. So if we have a look back here on our first slide and we take a look at our first example here, 小学校の時には. So the 2 particles following toki are used to explain a time when I was in primary school. So we're talking about a time that is different to now, as our note on our second slide refers to. And please keep in mind that itsu also means when, but it's used only for asking questions. So that's about all for this topic, but if you have any questions or comments, please let me know.